hello there. After a couple of weeks of exciting news which rocked the Teen Wolf fandom right down to its soft, gooey center, I'm back into my series on the gods of Teen Wolf with a look at the spirit form with the most complicated backstory. Dogs and death have been associated in human culture since before we had words to describe either humans or culture. Spirit dogs have heralded death or guarded the underworld in most of the planet's multi-theistic religions and regional folklore. Our Teen Wolf Hellhound was solidly linked with Odin's ghost riding hunt, but admitted that it's also known by names that predate Odin by centuries.
Who am I talking to?
Cerberus, Garn, Black Shep. I've had many names.
Today I'll try to reconcile all those various versions into a unified theory of the Teen Wolf Hellhound. If you like these deep dives into the canon and nostalgia of Teen Wolf, or you just want to keep up with the latest news on that upcoming Teen Wolf movie, you really should subscribe and join me on these weekly journeys back to Beacon Hills. As with my other look at the gods of Teen Wolf, this is not going to be a graduate studies program. I'm just trying to take the Teen Wolf canon we know and put it in context with the history that might have inspired it. Dogs and death. Death and dogs. The association probably started from something really gross, like the fact that before humans started burying their dead, and even shortly after, canine creatures would often be seen dining out on corpses. I know. Now, I could not find a solid dog-headed deity with the Olmecs or the Sumerians, so I'm starting with Egypt, where they had a whole bunch of jackal gods running around. Seriously, it's like Santa's reindeer out there. You know Set and Anubis, Wipwawet and Demotev, but do you recall... Yeah, I gotta stop. As bad as this rendition is, it will probably still get copyright claimed. The point is, the Egyptians had a bunch, and every one of them had something to do with death. Set ruled over storms, disorder, violence, and foreigners, all things that brought a lot of death in a world where stranger danger wasn't just catchy propaganda for kids. Anubis was in charge of death, mummification, and lorded over the underworld. Wipwawet was the opener of the ways. Now, he initially was a war god and sort of a mascot to the pharaoh that helped him in battle, but eventually he became associated with death as the guy who opened the way to the afterlife. Finally, Diwamotef. He's also associated with death, but he has a very specialized job description. He is the head on the jar where they store the stomach during mummification and interment. His one job is to protect the stomach in the afterlife. Okay, that's about a minute and a half more about Egyptian dog gods than you needed, but I'm building a platform on which our Teen Wolf Hellhound will stand. And the next level of that platform is the Greeks, who had their multi-headed guardian of the underworld, Cerberus. I say multi-headed because while I was always taught he had 3 heads, many actual ancient Greeks disagreed and give him just 2 heads. Some say it's 50 or even more than 100 heads, but many of those heads might be snakes, apparently. I think those ancient Greeks were ingesting some serious consciousness-enhancing substances. Anyway, there's yet another big dog guarding the land of the dead. Then, separated by 12,000 miles and about 3,000 years, the Aztecs came up with Xolotl, the dog-headed god that guided the souls of the dead. You get the idea? Somewhere in the early human psyche, dog and death became inextricably intertwined. And by the time Xolotl was ushering deceased Aztecs to their final seats, Odin's wild hunt had already been riding the storm for hundreds of years, collecting souls along the way with hellhounds at their side. The Norse pantheon also has Garmr, who guarded the afterlife. Almost every culture has a big black dog myth associated with fire, souls, and the afterlife. So when the Teen Wolf Hellhound says he's known by all these different names, he's telling us that the fiery spirit form that came to that battlefield in Afghanistan, the one that took over the life of poor blowed-to-hell Jordan Parrish, our Hellhound, is actually the basis for all the other death dog myths around the world. Should I get into the timing of Jordan's death? You guys know that, right? All right, I'll do it quickly. He died at the exact same moment the Nemeton in Beacon Hills was being charged up by Scott, Allison, and Styles in the middle of Season 3. All that new power attracted the attention of the Hellhound, and it grabbed the first available corpse that could get it to Beacon Hills to investigate. Overall, the way I prefer to think about the Hellhound thing is that in the Teen Wolf universe, there have always been this group of dog-like spirits that serve some supernatural purpose having to do with death and the afterlife. They have assumed different forms and functions and names as different cultures became aware of them, but they were always the same group of spirits doing what they've always done. There are Hellhounds riding the storm with Odin because that association is one of the most widespread and longest remembered. But the Wild Hunt is really just a cultural construct laid over an existing supernatural force. As I explained in my first Gods video, they look like a bunch of cowboys because our culture laid that construct onto them after the idea was spread through a popular song. But some force has always been out there, spanning the globe and gathering up souls and delivering them to an afterlife. This could also explain why a banshee was such a priority for Parrish. Lydia's ability to sense death would be very important to Hellhounds, and in simpler times, their scream might have been what drew them in. In Parrish's case, he was also getting very close to Lydia and didn't want her to get hurt. So in this case, the Hellhound's priorities and Parrish's priorities were simpatico. It also fits that Ghost Riders would leave the Banshee alone, since Lydia and her ilk would be very important to their whole afterlife Uber thing. Now, all that's pure speculation, but the pieces fit in my head for some reason. And then we saw with Howin that he stayed on Earth to make sure a particularly nasty resident of that afterlife didn't come back. So keeping things inside the dimension where the Ghost Riders dropped them is also the job of the Hellhound spirits, just like the Greek Cerberus did protecting Tartarus. Am I explaining this well? In my mind, it is so clear, but I don't think I'm explaining it well. The spirit inside Parrish and the other spirits like it are eternal. They'll be here long after these myths are forgotten, doing the same thing they always do, helping souls find the afterlife and guarding the doors to keep them there. Thanks for watching. Let's talk about this in the comments, because the more I look into this particular creature, the more complicated my thoughts become. I'll see you next time we go back to Beacon Hills.